that he's going to be able to continue to do his great reporting. And all of this is thanks to Elaine and Jerry Schuster, who are with us today, as Ambassador Barton noted. Their generosity and Elaine's vision made the Institute possible. Deeply grateful that with the launch of this project at the Schuster Institute, they are making a profound statement about the important role that journalism can play and actually should play in this issue. Elaine, of course, is no stranger to the UN. Last year, President Obama appointed her to be a public representative to the UN General Assembly, where one of her major concerns has been the horrific crime of human trafficking and slavery. Please join me in thanking them for their commitment to global justice. And now, it's also my honor to introduce Luis C. de Baca, Ambassador at Large and head of the U.S. State Department's Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons. I have more to say about him. One second. Like Elaine Schuster, Ambassador de Baca was appointed by President Obama, and I'll bet that was one of the decisions President Obama ever made. And that's because, given his selection by the president, it's clear that the president wanted someone to head his TIP office, his Trafficking in Persons office, who could bring a deep and nuanced understanding of and experience with this issue. Ambassador C. de Baca probably knows more about human trafficking than anyone else the president could even have considered. He is one of the Justice Department's most decorated leaders. While at the Department of Justice in the United States, Ambassador C. de Baca earned the Attorney General's Distinguished Service Award for his service as lead trial counsel in the largest slavery prosecution in the United States history. On Monday, his office released the 10th annual Trafficking in Persons, or what we call for short, TIP report. And for the first time, the State Department ranked the anti-slavery efforts of the United States alongside those of other nations around the world. We are so pleased that he is here to tell us more about his findings in the TIP report and the wonderful work that the State Department's office is doing. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Luis C. de Baca.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Florence Graves and Ambassador Barton. I'm delighted to be today with all of you to discuss this critical challenge that faces us in the modern era. I think it's long overdue that we have this kind of conversation with representatives from the UN, from civil society, from the media, et cetera, on how we harness everybody's energy and everybody's voice in this fight. I'd like to thank the U.S. mission to the UN, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime Institute. I'm very happy that Elaine and Jerry Schuster were able to join us today. The passion for doing the right and to leverage not only the access but the responsibility that comes from it is something that inspires all of us. And it's what allows people like me, people like our distinguished center panelist chair, Antonio Costa from UNODC. It's what allows us to do our jobs as we try to bring together so many of the different actors for a pretty easy and simple proposition, one would think, which is that there should be no more slavery in the world. It's easy and simple, but we're almost at year 400 of having said that. The first person, an Angolan man, brought to the United States in 1619 when this was a colony of Great Britain. Folks throughout the years fighting for their freedom, struggling for the ideal of freedom, and only in the last 150 years attaining the promise of that. But it's a promise that in the United States we take very seriously and we have to deliver on every day. And that's what this week is about. It's been a whirlwind of a week, starting with the release of the annual Trafficking in Persons report in Washington. The 10th anniversary, I'm very proud of the 10th anniversary, but that means that 380 years went without this kind of diagnostic here in the continent. The 10th anniversary of the Trafficking in Persons report was Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and the heroes from our report. This year's heroes came from around the world, and they've gone above and beyond to tackle the problem of slavery in their countries and elsewhere. Since then, we've been on Hill now here at the United Nations, and in a few minutes I'll be heading out to JFK to go to Vienna at the OSCE conference on domestic workers. One of the things that's reflected in this report this year is the problem of domestic servants. It's very interesting that after spending 10 years making the argument that, and having argued at the Vienna negotiations that resulted in the Palermo Protocol, that this should not be being thought of as simply trafficking in women and children, but should be trafficking in persons because so many men and boys are also enslaved. One of the things that might shock people to see from our report is our characterization of what we call the feminization of trafficking. It may stand as a little tension to what you hear from us. We're not backing off on the notion that this should be a gender-neutral fight, that this should be a fight that protects men and boys as well as women and girls. One of the things that we've seen is that the assumptions about trafficking are turned on their head. There's been an assumption that women are victims of sex trafficking and men are victims of labor trafficking. The reality is not that. Now, the assumption that women are victims of sexual abuse in trafficking situations continues to hold. Whether it's on a field, a farm, a factory, a brothel, a strip club, a domestic servant, women who are enslaved are routinely subjected to ongoing sexual slavery. Whether that's the thing that the employer makes their money off of, such as in the quote-unquote sex industry, or whether it's an adjunct to what they're doing, the specter of sexual abuse, the twin demons of slavery and rape go hand in hand. And that's something that we've seen and that we feel is important to call out, especially as we more and more at domestic servant issues. So I think it's appropriately fitting that the OSCE is having their conference on domestic servant issues this week, following on the heels of the agreement at the ILO over the last few weeks. For the first time, by this time next year when the ILO meets again, there will be an international convention guaranteeing the rights of domestic servants for the first time in history. It doesn't happen by itself. In fact, domestic servants are the people who have the least access to power. I certainly don't want to soft pedal the horrors of people who are subjected to sex trafficking in strip clubs, brothels, etc. But they know people. Other women might help them escape. Clients might even help them escape. We've certainly seen that in the United States. A domestic servant who is in a foreign land and owes the family for whom they work and never leaves the household, those people don't have someone who they can try to confide in. And so it becomes critical for them to have people who would work on their behalf. And that's one of the things that we see this year with a lot of our trafficking heroes. And I'm going to just very briefly call their names, and perhaps they can stand up and wave when I do. But so many of them have worked not just on sex trafficking, but also on domestic servant issues as well. People like Aminatu Mokhtar from Mauritania. Natalia Abdullaeva from Uzbekistan.